Hello and welcome. I am so thrilled to be here at the New York Jewelry Design Institute talking to you about my favourite subject, storytelling in jewelry for New York Jewelry Week 2023. Before I dive into jewelry storytelling, the power and the promise, I want to give you a brief overview about who I am and why I'm so passionate about jewelry storytelling. So I'm Siobhan and I run Authology, a storytelling studio for jewellery brands worldwide. Now, like so many of us, my personal and professional backgrounds are based on dual passions. I'm a writer and I studied literature, but a little while later I studied jewellery and became a jewellery designer for just over a decade. Now, while I was studying jewellery, I was fortunate enough to work on the shop floor for a British jewellery brand who at the time had a designer who was a fabulous storyteller. And so the designs that we were selling were based on her cultural and personal history, sometimes mythology, her travels. I quickly discovered that when I communicated these stories to the customers, they lit up. I discovered that when people are looking to buy jewellery, yes, they need to know the carat weights and the metal type and the price. But when people are falling in love, all they really want to know are the stories. And falling in love with jewellery is where it's all at for me. So for my career as a jewellery designer, I infuse my designs with storytelling. And now that I help independent jewellery designers across the world share their stories with their audiences, my passion is still the same. It is all about falling in love. So, it is my unwavering and absolute belief that there is no industry more magical than jewellery. Our pieces either come with fascinating stories behind them or they get to be part of some of the most important ones. Even the very process of designing and making jewellery is absolutely fascinating. And there is nothing that typifies the fact that jewellers tell the best stories more than the high jewellery houses. Now, one of the great privileges of being a jewellery designer is the freedom of imagination. And in the high jewellery houses, their jewellers really have the freedom to run with that. When you think of high jewellery pieces or collections, you'll know that most of the time they're based around extraordinary materials, most often precious gemstones or incredible diamonds. But despite the fact that they already have this intrinsic power, this fascination in their materials, you'll never see a high jewellery collection left to speak for itself. Every high jewellery collection will come with it some enthralling story that's been woven around it, some tale of imagination or wonder that's there to allow the audience to be brought into their world to showcase the designer's imagination. Now, anyone that's also interested in vintage jewellery will know the same applies. From charm bracelets to cameos, vintage jewellery often tells fascinating, sentimental, curious, sometimes even downright idiosyncratic stories. Vintage jewellery often even marks events that we no longer celebrate with jewellery, such as mourning or memento mori jewellery, and sometimes tell stories in secrecy, stories that we no longer need to hide, such as acrostic jewellery for communicating hidden messages of secret love. Now, if all this is making you think, we used to tell such amazing stories, so where does modern jewellery storytelling fit into this? Well, let me tell you, yes. Up until a decade or so ago, the stories that the Western mainstream jewellery market were telling were really based on traditional events, traditional markers for jewellery. Because so much of the jewellery purchasing market was based on gifting, these narratives were centred around romance or emotion. For instance, weddings, anniversaries, engagements, birthdays, Christmas. I'm pleased to tell you this is no longer the case. This is not our reality. We are in a point in jewellery where we have got more expansive, diverse and interesting stories than ever being told by our designers. Now, Part of this comes down to social media. Social media is a platform that allows jewellery designers of all sizes and of all stages to share their stories with audiences and to find the niches that really want to hear those stories. Not only this, but we've got a big increase in female self-purchasing. And these don't just want jewellery that views them in relation to someone else, that they're a fiancé, they're a wife, they're a mother. They want pieces that tell their individual story, that reflect their lives and loves as they are living it. Now, this brings us on to the designers that are finding new ways to tell the story of individuals. The example that I've got up here in my presentation is a British jewellery brand, CC Jewellery, who tells the most incredible personal stories through her uniquely curated selection of symbols. Now, she takes existing symbols from the world around her, from mythology, from literature, myth and legend, etc., and twists them into her own lexicon, her own storytelling world of symbols. For instance, we have the lobster for rejuvenation and mystery. We've got the skeleton lovers to symbolise a true love that never dies. Her tattooed inspired pieces are thoroughly modern, telling thoroughly modern stories, twisting and using symbols in a brand new way. Here in the US, you have Foundry, who have also created their own lexicon, their own language of symbols, building on symbols that are already there from different places, different ways of using symbols, but creating their own language that encourages their customers to stack up and combine talismans, to guide, to give direction, set intentions, to show the world what story they want to celebrate about their own life. These are the modern mementos, modern talismans that our jewellery customer is buying into now. Now, just as these designers are reinventing the world of symbolism and talismans, other jewellery designers are looking to those vintage and antique jewellery stories in order to tell new ones. The first example on this page is Clara Stones, a wildly creative Croatian jewellery brand who've looked at cameos and thought they still have relevance to the modern world, but how can we make them more contemporary? Their contemporary cameos use figures from music, pop culture, and even those of personal significance, such as pets, in order to take this that was traditionally reserved for figures of authority or historical significance and turn it into something with real personal meaning and a little bit of wit and irreverence. Then we've got Bauble Magpie from here in the UK, who sets intaglios, genuine antique intaglios, into these beautiful, sleek, modern settings that allow this antique material to have a whole new life in the modern era. Emma, the designer behind this range, communicates the history and the meaning of her intaglios on her Instagram page and website, but allows her wearers, her audience, to reimagine their use. She proposes, through both her design style and her storytelling, new ways in which these pieces can be understood and worn in the modern era. For some people, reimagining jewellery means reimagining heirlooms or pieces that have gone before. Because when we consider our loves and lives, we consider the fact that they change. Life is never static, and sometimes the chapters in our life mean that the jewellery we celebrate those things with needs to change along with it. Say, for instance, somebody has a ring that celebrated a relationship or marriage that has now ended. Now, for some people, they would want rid of this piece of jewellery because it is a memento of a time of their life that no longer brings them happiness to recall. Some people want to keep that piece of jewellery exactly as it is because even though that chapter has closed, it was a chapter that was once meaningful for them. Modern jewellery storytelling tells us that there is a third way. Some people want to use the materials in that ring to create a new piece of jewellery. Say, for instance, one that represents transformation or freedom or bravery. It is absolutely okay to decide that that piece of jewellery can be reimagined, that the symbolism and story and meaning behind it can have a new life. A piece of jewellery doesn't need to stay static, and you can decide what the meaning is behind it. It's fine if you can no longer find love in a piece of jewellery because it once meant something that doesn't exist, but it's also fine if you can reimagine and subvert that. The same applies to heirloom reworks. There has never been more of an appetite for and acceptance of reworking heirloom pieces. We know that the meaning and the story of a piece of jewellery is not held in the final piece alone. It's held in the stones, possibly in the metal, possibly in the very fact that you've been given that piece in itself. And so a vintage or antique piece can be reworked into something more wearable to keep that story alive and to keep that story fresh. There's a real balance, just in the same way as our examples earlier, Clara Stones and Bauble Magpie, have balanced a respect for antique materials with a healthy irreverence and refreshing of those materials to allow them to be relevant for a modern era. That same balance applies when looking at personally recreating jewellery. Because the theme that has run through all of this is that jewellery storytelling is your choice. A lot of what I've spoken about are narratives that are quite meaningful, but actually jewellery storytelling doesn't need to be sentimental in order to be valuable or be relevant. Actually, jewellery storytelling can be sentimental, or it can be purely about self-expression, or it can be both. And the two designers that I'm showing you here do both. Dorian Webb, a US jewellery designer, creates these incredible large-scale butterflies, which you can see here resting on the finger, and they create an unmistakable impact on the body. They are a statement piece of jewellery. But behind these butterflies is a narrative of belief and hope, and you as the wearer can choose to tap into this meaning, or perhaps you don't need to. Perhaps the self-expression of wearing these butterflies is enough. Acid Queen Jewellery, another US jewellery brand, has focused this collection on the sense of higher self-empowerment by using meaningful gemstones, the power of gemstones, and the power of symbols and form and texture. She creates this incredibly striking jewellery that has a real bohemian alternative look for it and absolutely creates a very distinct visual signature, but also has real meaning. They're real talismans of this sense of empowerment and creating yourself. So that's where we are with jewellery storytelling, and that's why I feel that we are in such an exciting point in time when it comes to telling stories through our jewellery. It's a conversation between both designer and wearer about what you want your jewellery to mean, what stories they can tell, and what parts of your life and loves and intentions can they harness. So what about the future of jewellery storytelling? Well, my hope and belief is that jewellery storytelling will continue to be as fascinating and diverse as it is at the moment, but the ways in which we tell these stories are only going to get more exciting. There has been real appetite in the last few years for interactive experiences and exhibitions, and the high jewellery houses are once again leading the way on harnessing this. Bulgari last year, and also Tiffany did it as well, created exhibits that took their audiences through the storytelling world of their brands. And note, that doesn't need to be audiences that are even in the market for their pieces right now or ever. They can be fans that want to access these brands and delve into their world and become part of their stories. The Bulgari exhibition showed us how collaboration can be a big part of storytelling when you go interactive. They created this art installation which allowed them to tell the history of their brand and their designs while linking up with the artistic present and relevant figures and experiences for today. Interactive experiences like this are going to bring a new sense of connection and intimacy to their audience while using large-scale, potentially digital or combined physical and digital experiences to envelop their audiences in a real sense of wonder. So that looks to the future. How about bringing storytelling into your personal jewellery collection now? Well, to bring modern jewelry storytelling to your jewelry now, I have 4 key tips. The first is to embrace fluidity. Symbolism doesn't need to be the prescribed symbolism it once was. We don't need to prescribe to that. The symbols and talismans you choose can mean anything you want them to for any event whatsoever. And on that note, reimagine purpose. Once again, the actual piece of jewelry that you choose to celebrate a particular event with, again, doesn't need to be set in stone. You don't need to go with whatever has been prescribed before. You can wear large-scale statement pieces of jewelry to symbolise something sentimental if you want. On the flip side, you don't need to have traditional pieces of jewelry for traditional events if they don't serve your needs and style. Self-define celebration. Once again, it doesn't need to be these classic events that we celebrate with jewelry. Don't wait for someone to celebrate you for you. Don't wait for gifts, birthdays, anniversaries. You define what's worthy of celebration. It could be the start of an incredible job. It could be leaving a horrible job. It could be doing something you're proud of, learning, starting a new chapter, moving into a new era of your life, or even just setting an intention for change. And finally, seek stories. There are so many incredible jewelry designers out there at the moment that are telling the most amazing stories. We've never been at a point where there is a more diverse range of stories, personal, cultural, mythological, whatever the inspiration might be, whatever the story is telling us, there are jewelry designers out there that are sharing their worlds and their imaginations with us. And there's never been a better time to find them. So seek out the jewelry designers that have stories, seek out the jewelry designers that are going to help you tell your own. With that, are there any questions on my presentation before I begin the conversation with Janine of New York Jewelry Design Institute? No? Okay. So when I was talking to Janine about my talk and letting her know what I was planning on talking about here today, I started talking about storytelling. We started talking about storytelling, and I think we probably could have continued that conversation for a good couple of hours. So I'd love to get Janine up here and continue that conversation.
I'll be up there with you.
I think so.
Do you want to sit on the chair and I'll bring my chair?
Sounds good.
You can do that. Thank you. Thank you.
Like I'm really
No, I can take it. I'll come up with you. Hi, everyone. For those of you who don't know me, I run the New York Jewelry Design Institute here in New York. And we help jewelry designers find their way, whether you're already in the industry or looking to come into the industry. We start with basic hand rendering classes, business classes, CAD classes, wax carving, whole slew of different classes. And our goal is to help people either increase their education or come into the industry fresh and start from scratch. So that's what we do. So welcome and thank you, Siobhan. That was a wonderful presentation. That was really, really interesting. I'm just curious, how did you, find some of these jewelry designers that they had beautiful pieces.
They do. They're incredible, aren't they? And so different. I think what's exciting about some of these jewelry designers is that they're so distinctive in their style, but then also so distinctive in their storytelling as well. So it's got everything. Actually, one of the best places there is to find new jewelry designers really is Instagram. Social media has changed how we're accessing jewelers and being able to access their stories. And so many of these jewelers that actually wouldn't necessarily have had a mainstream, audience once upon a time, 10 or 20 years ago. We've got this magical tool here. So yeah,
it's wonderful. Especially love Cece. Her storytelling I think it spoke to me a lot.
She's incredible. Yeah. Her pieces are wonderful.
Yeah.
Really, really great.
So what questions can I answer for you that?
Well, I loved our story when we were talking last time about, I know that you feel the same about the sort of spirit and the materials of jewelry. That's something that you are quite passionate about, isn't it? The actual materials that are going into it and the story that.
Exactly. Because I don't know if you're familiar, but actually metal is a conduit and it holds our energy. So I think that's really one of the reasons why it's such a beautiful gift to give to someone, because you're giving something of yourself that you've touched, that you've selected, that you've thought about, and that energy that's in that metal, or even sometimes in the stones, is held in that piece, and you're giving it to another person, and they're receiving your energy through this piece of jewelry, which I think is amazing. It's really just a beautiful, what other kind of gift could you ever want,
it's amazing. And for yourself, of course,
and for yourself, yeah. That's another thing that's changed quite a bit, is, we're buying for ourselves now, instead of waiting to be gifted.
Completely.
Right. And so what can you speak to that you've seen that trend over the last 15, 20 years easily, right?
It's really changed everything, I think, because you're right. When you're waiting to be given a gift of jewelry, not only is it not necessarily going to be something that speaks to you aesthetically, but actually it completely changes the way that we're giving jewelry. If it is waiting to be given as a gift, then actually you've only got, your relationship with somebody else to define your relationship with jewelry, because it's about romance, or it's about love, or it's about gifting, friendship at a push, but mainly it's sort of family or romantic relations. Whereas actually self-purchasing means we've got all these other stories of life to be able to celebrate in jewelry. And it can be something from, getting a new job or leaving a dreadful job, or, actually because you want to start something, and jewelry can be a way to get purpose or guidance or intention. So it's just completely opened up the styles that people are going for, but actually the stories as well, which obviously is what I find so
right. And also such a great way to express yourself through jewelry, whether you have something that's really bold. It doesn't necessarily have to be about the cost of the piece, but just the statement itself. And this is what you're telling the world, this is who you are. And I'm bold, I'm powerful, I'm beautiful, whatever is your message that you want the world to receive from you.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, do you find that your students are coming with that in mind when they're doing their jewelry, that actually they want to be able to communicate to the world? Is that something that you've noticed?
I have to tell you that my students come up with some of the most amazing designs that just blow me away, because I see everything. I mean, I've been doing this for, 12, 13 years or something like that. And the stuff that comes through, you think you've seen everything. You haven't, because I am just blown away at the ideas that they come up with. It's, I can't really say, because of course it's their personal designs, but oh my goodness, it's amazing. I'm very proud of them.
Yeah, I bet. I mean, tell me about how you started. What is your story?
So my story it's kind of funny, but I didn't really mean to start a jewelry design school. I think it found me instead of me finding it. But it took place in the financial crisis back in, 2009, 2010 timeframe. And I had just been trained as a bench jeweler, and I was coming out of interior design because as anybody who knows what happened during the financial crisis, real estate kind of plummeted, and so did interior design right along with it. And I was just playing around with jewelry, and because I was my background was interior design, I kept asking, well, how do you do this and how do you do that? And I just couldn't put the pieces together. And so I said, well, maybe I'll just help people along, keep everybody busy. And in 2011, we started with just some basic hand rendering, just drawing. And then that led to another class, and then that led to another class. And I'm like, okay, well, when the session's over, people will probably go back to their life. And they didn't. They wanted more classes. And the next thing I knew, I had 20 classes. And I actually started in that room. And then this room opened up. So I moved here. And then eventually both rooms opened up. So I broke through the wall. And I thought maybe COVID, that would be it. And everyone wanted to go online, but they didn't. They just kept coming and coming. And so I don't know if I founded the school founded me.
I love that. Yeah, I really love that it was a sort of response both ways to what they wanted. That's fantastic.
I wouldn't change it in any. I'm just really grateful however it came to be. So
sometimes the best stories are the ones that just happen, aren't
they? Exactly, right? And you can't plan for this. I never planned to start a school. But I guess that was my purpose.
Fantastic. I love that you're bench trained, actually. I didn't know
Bench,
that.
yeah.
And I think that's part of my appreciation, I think, for the magic of jewelry is being bench trained, because once you know what goes into making jewelry, that's a whole story in itself, isn't it?
Exactly. And also trained as a gemologist as well.
Okay. Yeah.
So a lot of experience. But I just love teaching. I absolutely love to see the students come in with wherever they're starting and then flourish. And it's amazing. And then to see their stuff on Instagram selling, and I'm like, yay!
That's amazing.
Yeah.
That's so good. Shall we see if any of the Zoom participants have any questions?
Absolutely.
Because we do have a chat, and I
or anybody.
Yeah.
Feel free to jump right in and
absolutely
let us know.
So that's an invite. Although, will it let me? There we go. Let's open this chat. Aha. What would you say? Okay, have you seen Janine Rocks? Okay. Janine Rocks.
Thank you.
What would you say to an entry-level designer putting together their first collection if there is no story? Okay, let me get this up. So we've got a jewelry designer question. The
stereo.
Yeah. Okay? Oh my goodness, no, that's not okay.
Technology.
That's a very bad idea indeed. Let's turn off the. No, that's also a bad idea. Let's undo this actually for now. I'm potentially going to ruin the. Yeah, that might be a little bit more sensible.
Oh, okay, that's good. We just kind of have no signal, but that's okay.
Okay.
We'll just kind of sit behind. It looks like we're in like the Alps or something.
This is quite nice. I mean, this is done. Yeah. Okay.
Now we're in Hawaii. We're traveling. I should travel band.
I should touch the technology.
That's fine. That's fine. I think everybody.
That's beyond my pay grade. So
technology, it's enough to make.
Yeah, absolutely.
With a black screen pretty soon.
So new jewelry designers, don't get involved in technology. No, new jewelry designers. If there is no story, actually the story is a really important part of your brand, and there will be a story behind it. So most of the people that I work with are independent jewelry designers, and I describe it as there's a quote that a sculpture is in the marble, and it's just about getting out the sculpture that's already there.
Love it.
And actually, I sort of repurpose that very pretentious quote for myself quite a lot, because that's how I feel about storytelling. Independent jewelry designers have got stories behind their brands. They're always there. It's just about teasing it out and working out what the story is that actually excites your audience, because at the end of the day, jewelry collectors and jewelry wearers, it's about their story. They're excited by the stories that jewelry designers tell, but actually it's what matters to them. So as a jewelry designer, you do need to kind of work out what your story is, because nowadays jewelry doesn't sell itself. Even if you have really stunning, distinctive pieces, you saw all the examples in the presentation, the designers there have really fantastic style, really distinctive style, but actually all of them use stories to be able to communicate and kind of romance and bring people into the emotion of their work. So there isn't a sort of that's okay answer. Actually finding the story behind your brand
exactly. And to add to that, one of the high jewelry companies go back to antiquity, and they'll read some of the stories in antiquity and then reinterpret what they feel that story is. Noah's Ark is a big one that was reimagined by Van Cleef & Arpels. I think maybe 2 years before COVID. And what they did to speak to what Siobhan's talking about is they retold the story of the animals that came 2 by 2. So every animal had a pair, but the pair was different. They weren't identical. And so you might have a rabbit standing and then one laying down, or an elephant looking one direction and one doing something else. It was really amazing. And they retold the story of Noah's Ark, which I thought was so beautiful.
I think that's actually a really good example, because actually it shows what high jewelry houses do so well. They can tell these really interesting stories, and actually quite kind of curious and idiosyncratic stories, because they've got their kind of brand story, they've got their signature stories. you know, in the example you've just given, their brand story is about kind of wit. You know, they've got a really sort of witty sense and sense of playfulness. And so a story like that really
whimsical, very whimsical.
Whimsy is a perfect word for it. So actually working out kind of what your brand feel is then means that you've got, you know, the ability to tap into all of these stories. So there is the winding answer to that one.
I remember you once told us the story about how Glicken and Pals create their collection, that they pick.
Yeah, they go back to exactly what Laura is saying. They go back to antiquity and they retell the story. So, for example, their design team might read a story that was like I'm using Noah's Ark as an example, and they'll come back to, you know, to their meetings and they'll say, okay, what did you pick up from the story and what was your inspiration? And then they start to create their mood boards and their designs, but they tell a story that's unique to them. They don't walk 47th Street or they don't walk Fifth Avenue and look at the store windows, which is exactly what I tell my students not to do, because it's very easy to fall in love with a piece of jewelry, right? And you're going to forget that you fell in love with that store window 3 years from now, and you're going to think that it's your idea, and you're going to, you know, start, oh, look at what I created, and actually it was created by somebody else, and you forgot. So a really great way to begin to design and to begin to get inspiration is retell the story in your own words, and what inspired you by the story, and what stands out, and what do you want to focus on, and what is the message? What do you want to tell as a storyteller? What do you want to let your audience know? Of course, your audience is buying the jewelry, right?
Absolutely. You have to know what it is that you want your audience to feel, you know, which, as I've said, could be anything from real sort of sentimental meaning to just making them feel really badass, an amazing piece of jewelry, which is completely legitimate. We've got a question here, and I will just take the tag. We're all good. About how we appeal to a female self-purchaser. My headline figure on that is actually there's not one female self-purchaser. So it's less about appealing to a female self-purchaser as actually who is your audience and what matters to them specifically.
Exactly. Absolutely. Yes. You know, once you get to know who your audience is and who your, as they would say, your target customer is, they're going to tell you what they want. You're not going to have to guess. For example, if I go back to the days when I started the school, how did I get to class number 2 and class number 3? My students told me, well, Janine, you need to be offering this class. And can you tell me how to do this? Because I really want to learn. And I'm like, oh my God, I need another class, you know? So your customers will tell you what they want. It's up to you to hear them. That's the key. You know, we have to listen. In today's world, that's a valuable trait. We all have something to say, but listening is, but hearing your customer and then reinterpreting what they're telling you, because what they're saying and what you're hearing, it doesn't always line up. So you have to be really clear about what you think your customer is saying to you, and then give it back to them. Is this is what you're looking for? And they will tell you. They'll have no problem telling you. Believe me, especially here in New York.
I can well imagine that. Do you know what? Actually, with Instagram nowadays, we have a direct link to the customers. You can see how they talk. You can see how they interact, and you know what's valuable.
Exactly.
And it absolutely is. I always say about storytelling. Actually, your story is not about you. Even though you think it might be, and it might be part of your story, you know, because particularly independent jewelry designers, as I said, there's so many amazing stories out there, but actually at the end it is just about appealing to what it is, that whether it's the values or the needs or just the desires of your customer.
Exactly. And I think that's such a great point, Siobhan, because what a lot of jewelry designers, when they're first getting started out, start to think is they're going to create jewelry that they like and somebody will buy it. And that's not going to happen. I mean, it might happen, but what you really want to do is think about who is your customer, what their needs are, what their likes are, what their price point is, and then start to design for them, because that's really what it's about. It's about your customer. I mean, yes, your personal influence is going to be in it. And yes, as the designer and the creative person that you are, they will gravitate to you. But you really want to be thinking about when you're sitting down at that blank slate, who's going to be buying this piece? What do I know about them that I could put into a design that will entice them to say, take me home with you?
You know, it's exactly that. It's so, when we talked about this tonight, it's so easy to see a piece of jewelry and like it, because there is so much beautiful jewelry out there. But actually, people aren't going to buy it if they haven't fallen in love. And if there's not something that's really speaking to them and it's got the emotion behind it, then it doesn't go home.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, it might get saved on Instagram.
Or
a photo gets sent to someone, but it's
or
not
a little
coming
like,
home.
yeah, a little like emoji.
Yeah, exactly. A little bit of like emoji, but yeah, it's got to come home.
Right, exactly, exactly.
So yeah, again, not a blanket answer for that one, but it's all about identifying. Another question here, can we elaborate a little bit more about the meaning of embrace fluidity? Of course, this is a kind of two-pronged thing actually when it comes down to symbolism. So I think we're all familiar with symbolism having been, you know, as I said, the kind of wedding ring, the unbroken band symbolism, pearls and diamonds have got their own symbolism that's come with it. There's always quite traditional symbolism. But actually, some of the examples that we looked at shows that you don't need to look at what's already come and think, well, that's the playbook that I'm working with and that I need to work within. Actually, we've got complete freedom. You can pick and choose and pull from the world around you and the symbolism and what matters to you. And actually, this applies to both designers and collectors and wearers. You can decide what you want something to mean. That's absolutely fine and appropriate. So there's fluidity in the sort of general sense. Don't get kind of stuck in what the traditional symbolism is. But there's also fluidity in the fact that life changes. And as I kind of touched on, for instance, you might have an engagement ring and then that relationship ends. Well, you can choose whether or not you want to scrap and sell that ring, get rid of it completely, or as more and more people are doing, rework that ring and go, I'm going to reclaim the symbolism of this piece for myself.
Exactly.
I'm going to use these materials, but I'm going to choose that I'm flipping the energy in this, that I'm flipping the story. And I'm going to choose to make a new narrative out of it, because life changes completely.
Yeah, why not? I mean, you own your own power. And what's better than re-embracing something and making it uniquely your own and saying, this is now me. This is who I decide to be. And 5 years later, you want to change it, you get the opportunity to change it again. Why not? Who's to say, right?
Completely. And that's why, like, heirloom and antique reworks come in as well, because I do get that there is obviously, you know, there needs to be a mixture between the kind of reverence and the respect for antique pieces, and some pieces need to stay as they are. But if you're not going to wear it, I do think there's a really increased appetite at the moment for reworks, because people are recognizing, actually, I could bring this story to life again, or I could give it a new story if I just harness this into something that's more aesthetically me. And actually that's more valuable than keeping something its original.
Exactly. And all that energy, that new energy that goes into that piece that now gets held.
Yeah.
So beautiful.
Absolutely. So
do we have any jewelry designers here in the class? Yes, yeah. Can you share some of your stories with us?
I mostly use senses or feelings and put it into the metal, textures or shapes. I try to do that a lot.
Oh, that's wonderful. So you can understand, you can relate to what I was saying about putting your energy into that the metal's a conduit, and whoever receives that piece will feel your energy.
Yes.
Yeah, that's wonderful. That's beautiful. What's the name of your business?
It's Mordente.
Mordente. Oh, wonderful. Very nice. Very nice. Yeah, we have. Yeah, we've had a few.
Oh yeah.
But that's wonderful. Who else? Jewelry designers. Yeah. Yeah.
I make jewelry that I use the rainbow as inspiration, and symbols, literal symbols, rainbow, birds, beads, and bits.
Oh, nice, nice. What's the name of your company?
It's Torn Richards.
Torn. Is it your name?
It's my maiden name.
Wonderful.
Yeah. Elaborate piece.
Necklace.
Oh, and it clouds. Birds in flight.
Wonderful. And do you work as a bench jeweler?
I don't. I work at a studio at my house in Providence, Rhode Island.
Oh, wonderful.
Yeah. And I worked in the costume jewelry industry prior to kind of having a family, creating my own studio. But I was trained as a jeweler.
Very nice, very nice. And so you do what Siobhan was talking about, that your pieces actually tell the story.
They do, and people really, they know right away. There's no the emotion is there.
Mhm.
It's like, boom.
Yeah.
I'm here, I was here for a pop-up.
Oh, very
And,
nice.
Yeah, and then I was like, I gotta get to.
Well,
It's wonderful.
thank you. Yes,
First time.
wonderful. Well, welcome. And yourself, you're a jewelry designer?
Yeah, I'm a jewelry designer. Usually I'm inspired from, from the nature, from organic forms.
Mhm.
And, I'm trying to find alternative materials to work with and, upcycle the materials, finding new way to use them.
And the necklace that can you tell us a little bit about your necklace?
Yeah, it's made from plastic bags.
Oh, very interesting.
I have treated it with heat
Uh-huh.
and not fire, heat.
Mhm.
And try to give a visual form to it. I stopped doing it because it turned out to be very toxic.
Oh, yeah. Right.
Procedure.
Uh-huh.
It was part of my experiment with upcycling things that they are considered as trash.
Mhm.
Things that they can,
It's amazing. Yeah. I was at an event, I think it was last winter, I want to say, and one of the sponsors at the event had laid out their jewelry, and she had a whole exhibit of photographs around New York of all trash, which she was very upset over. And she made pins out of like these little mini trash bags, and they ended up being pins. And her message was, listen, clean up New York. This is not acceptable. Clean it up, recycle this, and do something with these trash bags. So I understand where you're coming from.
Yeah.
Very nice, very beautiful. Any other jewelry designers? Yeah. Are you? Yeah. Hi. What's your name?
Mary.
Hi, Mary.
I like many jewelry designers and been inspired by historical jewelry and classic, but I like to make collections based on like a certain year. Like I always like to have an imagined woman, and this was her personal jewelry collection, which I'm kind of working my way through the timeline of history. I have a collection based on like what would be a Roman second century Roman woman's jewelry collection, and
wonderful.
Kind of 16th century Dutch woman. But I'm kind of creating my own jewelry timeline, jumping back and forth.
I love that. That's great.
It's really fun to imagine, like, this is.
What did Cleopatra really wear?
And so, and I also have like 1950s vintage charms you can find everywhere. I also have a kind of ongoing collection of those. It's basically because I don't have enough access to antique jewelry myself, so I make my own.
I love it. That's wonderful. What's the name of your company? Your business?
So it's Mary Jewelry, but Mary is spelled like the word fairy, like MAIR.
Oh, wonderful. Very cool. Very cool.
Lovely story.
I know, it's wonderful.
Demonstrating new materials, reinventing vintage and antique, tapping into emotions. Just demonstrating all the good stuff.
Exactly. How about online? Is there anybody out there that wants to share their
Let's have a look.
story?
Yeah, absolutely. If anybody wants to share stories that we can read out, or indeed has any more questions. The anticipation.
Janet, you want to share your story with us? I know you're out there.
Nothing to be on the spot. I'm busy listening and getting inspired by all your stories. I'm also designing a necklace as we're talking. And what would you like to know about my story? What part of the story?
How you started your jewelry collection and the name of your business? Because I think the name of your business really encapsulates your whole brand.
Oh, well, so talk about inspiration. I was a youth group leader, and through that, I got inspired so much through the youth. And when I was taking one of the Janine classes, that's what really inspired me. Just all this, having all this information from my students, and then putting in something that was really meaningful. So the inspiration of my jewelry is just wearing something meaningful and to connect you with, your higher source, your spirituality, however, that translates to you, and then just bringing it to life and just remind us that we are connected, right? That we're connected to that higher source. The name of my business is Panoply Jewels. And Panoply Jewels, when I was looking for the name, and Janine was part of this whole process, she is such an inspiration. She's so empowering with her students, and I have so much to thank her for. I found this.
Okay, to do that.
Sorry. I just have to say, because she's really empowering, and she's like kept me going, and don't give up, and things come and hard, but she's there. And so Panoply Jewels means in ancient times was the armor that the soldiers used to wear for war. And in modern times, Panoply means a collection of great things. And to me, that was just like it told all the story from everywhere. Like wearing pieces that will protect you, or that will feel that just remind you of spirituality. And also, I wanted to create great things, collection of great things. So right now, I have two collections. One is armor, and then the other one is honey. And honey also like ties up with my upbringing and how I grew up with bees, and now making like inspirational pieces with hexagons that is basically how bees build their honeycombs. So all that, it's just that's my story, a little bit of my story. So
thank you. Yeah. And Janet's pieces, like some of the pieces that she had were like shields and crosses and anything that was to protect you, as a symbol of protection. So one of the things that I loved about her collection and the name of her business is that, she was giving something to somebody who, when they got up in the morning and went out into the world, had something that just spoke to them to feel protected, that just, even if it was just a small piece, of a shield or a cross or anything that spoke to you that said, I'm not alone in this world. And I just thought that was so beautiful.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jenna. Thank you for sharing your story with us.
Thank you.
We have another question here, Diana. Thank you. Thanks, Jenna. I normally create bespoke pieces which are full of stories. Great. Where would I start in creating a full collection? I normally design in gold, diamonds, and gemstones. If you're already doing bespoke work, then kind of linking in actually to what you were saying earlier, your customers are probably already telling you what matters to them. You'll have reviews, you'll have the conversations that you're having with your customers when you're doing bespoke pieces. And actually, you probably are able to find patterns in the themes or the occasions or events or what it is that a customer is valuing about you and your jewelry, your design, your service, whatever it might be. And that's probably a good place to start with the full collection as well, because actually, if it's been successful for your bespoke clients, then chances are they are your audience and they are your niche. You're not necessarily going to be tapping into that exact same symbolism, because obviously bespoke pieces will be coming from, the customer themselves. But actually being able to work out what it was that they, valued, are they leaning always in a particular way? Is it particular events or particular stories that are there a lot will give you a sort of starting point. And actually, again, the really good thing about the industry that is, as we have at the moment, is that you can talk to your customers and you can talk to what would be the prospective audience for a full collection on Instagram. What resonates with people? If you share a piece that's got X symbolism behind it, and then share another piece that's got Y symbolism behind it, what do people respond to? Because it is a back and forth. That's something else, actually, I think about modern jewelry storytelling. There is so much to talk about, but here's another one, is that it's a conversation. It's a two-way street these days, isn't it?
And then the piece itself becomes the conversation.
This is absolutely true, because then the wearer then puts their own symbolism on it as well. So I think there's a whole other conversation there about that. But don't feel that it's completely in a vacuum.
And I think we're in a time right now where bespoke jewelry is the trend. I think people really want something that's unique, that speaks to them. I don't think that I think we've kind of moved past all that mass material that's been mass marketed. And, you know, everybody has that piece, you know. They're looking for something that's really unique and that makes them feel unique and that they're connected to. So I think I call it that we're in a bespoke movement. I think that's the movement that we're actually in right now.
I think that's a really good point, actually. And actually being able to offer, even at the very least, personalization. You know, people, even if it's engraving or choosing the particular gemstone that means
Your fingerprint, you know.
Yeah, absolutely. Or as in the example of Foundry, actually being able to pull together, you know, it might be the designer's full collection, but actually you can pull it together in a way that's yourself, whether that's styling or symbolism. So I would agree with that. That's a really good point.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay, ladies, anything else we could, you know, talk about or? Yeah, tell us.
I want to start a new collection based on my family's story. But I don't know how to start translating this story into the pieces. Like, do you have any tips to start? I don't know if it's keywords or.
Yeah, my gut feeling would be to start off what it is that you want your audience to feel, because no doubt sharing that story is something that will be of interest and will be fascinating and will be valuable. However, because at the end of the day you want to sell these pieces, actually you do need to sort of cycle back and go, actually sharing my story is something that I want to do and I know there'll be an interest there, but what is it I want my customer to feel? How is it I want them to relate to these pieces when they're actually out there? What is the relationship they're going to have with them? And actually start from there, because if you know what it is that you want people to feel, do you want them to feel inspired by your story? Would they be buying into it because it's also a story of inspiration? Is it a story of empowerment? Is it a story of fascination because it's perhaps, you know, a cultural story that they wouldn't necessarily have had access to? So what is it I want them to feel? How is it I want them to relate to them? Because that will then give you the foundation for saying, well, actually, if that's the impact I want to have, then is it statement pieces, small pieces, charm piece, you know, whatever it might be, that then sort of leads you on into the product decisions, I think. So that would be my.
Yeah, excellent. That's excellent. Sorry. Also to add exactly to what Siobhan is saying is that, you know, what is your story? Is it about triumph? Is it about courage? Is it about tradition? Is it about family? You know, just to add everything that she's saying, what do you want them to know? And maybe another thing that you can do is maybe write out the story in your own narrative and then try to pull what you're saying in your story out. Like what is really your message here? That might be another way for you to kind of access ultimately what your message will be. I don't think you're going to get it like right away. Usually it takes a couple of iterations and maybe sharing your story with other people and seeing what they hear from your story. You know,
it's a really good point. And actually I think writing it down is a good point, because you might see what images come out, which actually is potentially a starting point for, you know, actual looking at the aesthetic side of things as much as the story. So I think that's really great.
Yeah, exactly. Does that help you?
Yes.
Oh, good. Yeah.
I feel like sometimes though your process is your starting point. And as a maker, as an artist, I consider myself an artisan jeweler. I feel like it starts with your process because that's what engages you. And then if a customer, it's hard to balance between what you need to say based on your family and sharing their tradition and then giving to the customer what they want and altering it. I find that so hard. I'm older, you're younger, but like, I feel like, you know, that does play into it. It's like, how much are you going to step out of your process and what you need to do to as a maker? Anyway, I think about that.
Yeah, I think that's excellent.
It's a very hard, it's a balance. You know?
Yeah. And that's why I said it's, you know, not going to be the first iteration. Maybe you go through a few times and until you really kind of fine tune it until you said, this is it. This is exactly where I want. And it's never it as a creative, right? We're never finished with our work, right?
No, it's never happened. If you're happy, something has gone wrong. No, I agree. But it is a difficult balance, because actually the most personally satisfying thing when doing jewelry design may be to do something that's incredibly personal and to really just lean into that pure creativity of creating. And actually, as an artist jewelry, your process is probably part of your story.
Mhm.
Actually, the fact that you're creating in that way is probably part of the allure for your customers, because they're buying into something really creative and artistic, and actually that's something in itself. But then at the end of the day, your ability to continue to create will come from having some measure of commercialism, which is the sort of dirty word that we all sort of have to lean into at some point. Exactly. So you're absolutely right, it is getting that balance, and sometimes it is pushing it out there with the creativity and then pulling it back in, whether that's then aesthetically, whether it's having your showpiece and then your accessible pieces. But that is the lovely thing about storytelling, is actually, as long as you can find that sort of common ground between what will matter to my customer, but then what can I open their eyes to, and what can I share them, actually they'll probably be really excited to buy into that. So yeah, you're not wrong. It's always the balance.
That's the fun part, starting at the beginning. That's
Yeah.
fun.
But I think a lot of people get very intimidated in that beginning part, like and I say this to my students in one of my classes, is that, everybody, every creative person, whether you're designing jewelry or designing a room or writing a poem or writing music, we all stare at that blank space. I'm like, oh my God, oh no, I'm frozen, I can't think of anything. And you got to just start slowly, and I usually say to my students, just think about who's going to buy it. Who are they? What do they look like? How old are they? What do they do for a living? What do they enjoy doing? And then that kind of takes you out of you, so it's not like so much pressure's on you. You just kind of can go into this dreamland, like where you go, which is so beautiful, and just kind of imagine, what would somebody in the 15th century be doing? What does she look like? How does she walk? What does she wear? And then that way there, you're a little bit free to dream. And that's really the beginning of the creative process, is to just dream. Right?
Yeah, absolutely. That is a dream.
It's a dream to dream.
Absolutely. Check where we are we are.
How are we doing on time? Are we good?
I think maybe I think we might be done on Zoom. If anyone has one last question or a last question here.
Anything else we could answer for you or inspire you?
Yeah. Or is dreaming our final note? What do you know about that thing? Now this is an interesting question. This is slightly off the topic, but this is how long do we have? What do we think about using AI?
And that's a very interesting point. I think AI is a great source of inspiration if it's used as inspiration, because basically my understanding of AI is that it's pulling from things that have already been done. And so if you're pulling from other people's work, that's one thing if it's inspiring you. But I wouldn't use it to say, oh, this is the end all be all. This is my piece. Use it as a way to get you to jumpstart you into your inspiration.
I think the tool is exactly it, and I think it's exactly right what you say. From the writing side, ChatGPT has got really big. In fact, from a moving slightly onto the industry side of things, I have a podcast, and the last thing I did on my podcast was ChatGPT, because you know what, we are not going to be able to escape AI, and if we're not harnessing it in some way as a tool, then you're going to be left behind, because everybody else is going to be using it.
Exactly.
But it should be a tool. There are definitely, and you've touched upon this, there's definitely ethical side to it, because it is using existing work out there. There are no original ideas anymore. The jewelry market is so saturated, it's so big, that we know we're going to pull from existing things, but actually AI is potentially doing that without people's work and not necessarily knowing they're pulling from it, and if you use what it gave you, you could potentially be pulling from work without necessarily intending to. So definitely are ethical concerns, but I think using it as a tool and knowing that people are, and it will never be as good as human creativity.
Exactly.
Exactly.
I feel, I think AI is a really great tool to use, but what Siobhan said is just, if you just go within and just really take some time, and I know this is more challenging, but just really take some time to quiet your mind and just think about what do you want? You're going to get those answers. You don't need AI. If you take tracing paper and start kind of doodling and put that aside, and then pull another tracing paper and doodling and put that aside, and you get 3 or 4 and then start layering them on top of each other, you'll come up with something very unique, very fast. Because that's kind of reminds me of what AI is.
It's true. I think you know, the end conclusion with those is, and this touches on, this is design and storytelling, is the key words at the moment are originality and authenticity. That's what people want. That's what, as designers, we want to be producing and putting out there. And so actually, as long as you can be convinced that end process is something that is original to you and it's authentic to you, and
it fills that bespoke movement, right?
Yeah,
That speaks to that whole movement.
Yeah, and it's authentic and original to the customer too, and allows them to feel that way about their jewelry. Then I think that that's achieved what you want to do with the
Exactly.
pieces and the designs.
Because I always tell my students, if you're walking down 47th Street or you're walking in and looking out of the showroom windows and you go and you make a piece that somebody's already designed, then you're not really a designer, right? You're just a manufacturer. You're just remanufacturing a piece. You didn't design it, somebody else designed it. But if you really want to be a designer, you have to be original, be your authentic self.
Absolutely. And there's so many ways to do that. There's in the story, there's in the designs, and the craft processes. There is still, despite how big the jewelry industry is, with the combination of all those things, there are still opportunities to be original these days. And that's really exciting.
That is.
People really want that.
Yeah, I think so.
I think we've got a last couple of ones in here, but I think that's one for you. Details about your jewelry classes. I'm actually going to go and put up on the screen for the Zoom participants, because I can show it to the class people after we go. I'm going to put up a last slide that's got all the Instagram handles and websites of the designers I've shared, but also New York Jewelry Design Institute. So you can go head to the website, follow and explore the classes on there. Yes, absolutely. The recording will be sent to
all of the participants, I think, right?
Yeah, it will be sent to everybody, the participants. And thank you so much for the lovely feedback, and thanks. And thank you so much for joining us.
Yeah, thank you, Siobhan. This is wonderful.
You're so welcome.
And thank you to everyone that came.